Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel and my name is Gaurav. This is a day 8 video of Ansible 0 to 50 and in this video we'll discuss about Ansible variables. Previous video we have seen Ansible first real-time project for beginners. In that we have explained how to write a to install Apache web server and how to access that web server from different remote hosts. So the content of this video will be Introduction to Ansible variables, how to define variables in Ansible playbooks, host and group variables in Ansible, using arrays as a variables, how to capture command output with registered variables. So before starting this video, I want to explain objectives of this video. So once you will complete this video, you will know how to create and use variables in a playbook, manage variables for host and groups, capture command output using registered variables, understand which variables value take priority when conflicts happen. So let's get started. Introduction to Ansible variables. So Ansible support variables that can be used to store the values, and variables in Ansible help you to use information, reduce repetition, and make playbooks easier to manage and update. So, example of what variables can store, like users to create, packages to install, services to restart, files to remove, archives to retrieve from internet. Variable name must start with a letter and they can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. The following table illustrates difference between invalid and valid variables. Here you can see valid variables. You cannot keep the space variables name. Like wave space server is invalid variables. Wave underscore server is valid variable. Similarly, you cannot put dot in variables name. So remote dot file is invalid variable. Remote underscore file is a valid variable. First, a, a space file. Again, you cannot keep a space. So instead of a space, we can use underscore. The next is defining variables. How to define variables? In Ansible, you can define variables in several places. To keep things easy, think of them as three main levels: global levels, play levels, and host levels. Global levels, these are variables you set from command line or Ansible configuration files. Play level, these are variables defined inside playbook or related files. Host level variables. These are variables set for a specific host or group in inventory discovered through fact gathering or create with registered tasks. When Ansible finds the same variable's name in more than one place, it follows simple rule. The more specific variable wins. Host level variables can be overridden by play level variables. So if you define variables for host level under inventory file, that can be overridden by play level variables. So if you also define the same variables in a playbook, that can overridden to host level variables. Play level variables can be overridden by global level variables. So if you define the variables inside the play and if you also define variables on command line, like when you execute add command, that can be overridden by global level variables. That is add when you define variables in add command. Now we will discuss about using variables in Ansible playbook. How can we define variables? How can we use variables in playbook? Variables are important part of Ansible playbook because they make it easy to manage values that may change. Instead of repeating the same information in multiple tasks. You can define variables once and reuse it anywhere in playbook. Defining variables in a playbook. You can define your own variables directly inside the playbook. For example, you can see after host, you can define variables by vars as a key, and then you can define the variables as a key value. Like user is a variable and value of the variable is Joe. Home is a variable name and value is a forward slash home forward slash Joe. So here user and homes are variables that can be used later in this task. We will discuss uh, these also. Using external file variables. So instead of defining variables inside a playbook, you can store them in external files. This helps keep playbook clean and organized. So you can also define these variables in a file and then you can mention that file there in this file like vars underscore files. Then you can give the path of the file. The file vars underscore sorry vars forward slash users dot yml byte content user column Joe home column home Joe. Using variables in task. Once you define variables, you can use them in a task by wrapping the name in double curly braces. Vars user Joe task. So the task is to create a user, and for creating user we use user modules and then name. Then you need to put the username, and username we already defined under variables. So we can use that variables under curly braces with double quote. Ansible will replace the curly braces user with Joel when the play runs. Important. Always use quotes when variable start a value. When a variable is the first item after the column, you must put it in quotes. Without quotes, Ansible may think you are trying to start YML dictionary and give an error. Incorrect. This is incorrect. Correct. This one. Because here we use quotes. So using quotes, avoid YML parsing errors and ensure Ansible read the variable correctly. Now I will explain one real-time example for how to define variables and how to use variables. So let me open my command prompt of lab. So yeah, now you can see I am on my lab machine on Ansible control node. So here I will create one sorry, one file where I will write play demo for how to define variable and how to use it. Host dot then can use vars. Under vars, you can define variables like name Kumar, home directory, home Kumar. Now tasks. Under tasks, need to define name. Name of the task is create user on VM3. User module name as we already discussed, we should always use quotes and curly braces. A state present. Here I have done one mistake because Kumar is not variables, name is variable. Okay, so now I will run this playbook. First of all, I will check syntax error. Text check. Okay, so we can see the error found variables using reserved name. This name is already reserved. So now let me check. Yeah, you can see there is no error. So name is already reserved variable. We cannot use that. Let me run this. Okay, you can see the user already created on M3. So let me log in this host to verify. Okay, you can see the Kumar. They're already created. Now I will do small modification. Will try to remove this. Remove user name state to force. Yes. First of all, verify syntax error. There is no error. So we'll run this variable for playbook. Okay. You can see okay. User was already created and now user has been removed from this node. So let me show you. Yeah, you can see the home file also removed. Okay, so now I will move further this video and will explain host and group variables in Ansible. So sorry. So Ansible lets you assign variables to a specific hosts or whole groups of hosts. These are called host variables and group variables. Host variables apply to one a specific host. Group variables apply to every host in a host group. In terms of priority, host variables override group variables and play variables override both. You may see variables defined directly inside inventory file, although this method is now considered outdated. Below is example setting variables for a single host. You can see in inventory we can define variables for single host and we can also define variables for group in inventory file. So if we need to define variables for group, we can define in this way. In per bracket group name colon vars, then we need to define variables like user join. So following is another example setting variables in a group made of subgroup. Yeah. So like server one is a one group, server two is another group, and this is a child group. Servers, children, server one and server two. So if we define variables, if we want to define variables for subgroup, then we can define in this way. Servers, vars, then we need to define the variables. So some disadvantages of this approach are that it makes inventory file more difficult to work with. It mixes information about host and variables in the same files and use of obsolete syntax. Inventory variables are overridden by variables set in playbook, but both kind of variable may be overridden through argument passed to Ansible or Ansible playbook command line on command line. Variables set on command line are called extra variables. Extra variables can be useful when you need to override the defined values for a variables for a one of one of run for a one of run of a playbook. For example, we can pass variables in command line in this way hyphen e that variable package Apache using array as a variables. So instead of assigning configuration data that relates to same element, list of packages, list of service, list of users, and so on to multiple variables, administrator can use arrays. One consequence of this is that an array can be browsed. For example, consider the following a snippet. User one underscore first underscore name Bob. User one last name Jones. User one home directory. Users B Jones. Now user two first name last name and home directory. This could be written as a as an array called users. So under users B Jones and A Cook and under users B Jones. Under B Jones, first name Bob's, last name Jones, home directory /users B Jones. Then another user, a cook, first name, last name, home directory. We can use the following variables to access user data. In dot notation, we can use users vjohns first name, users vjohns first name. Return, it will return Bob. User a cook home directory, users a cook home directory will return users cook. We can also use in dictionary style syntax. Users vjohns first name, return Bob. User a cook home directory, return users a cook. Both style work because the array is stored internally as a Python directory. Now we will discuss about how to capture command output with registered variables. And this is also very important when you will write playbook for larger project. So administrator can use the registered statement to capture the output of command. Output is saved into a temporary variables that can be used later in playbook for either debugging purpose or to achieve something else, such as particular configuration based on command line output. How registered variable works. So when you add registered column some variables to a task, Ansible store everything about that task results, message, return code, output, and more. Inside variables you specify. The following playbook demonstrate how to capture output of command for debugging purpose. You can see this is a very simple playbook to install HTTPD on remote host, and then we use registered keyword to to capture the output of this task, and later we use debug to display that captured output. Yum task attempt to install HTTP. The result of this task is saved in install result. Debug task print the content of the variables. So let me show this in lab. So register, then debug. So debug will print the output of this variable. Let me run this. First, we should always check syntax error. There is no syntax error. Now we'll run. Okay, you can see the debug task output like true, create home, true, failed, group ID, home directory, name, shell, state present, system, false, UID this. Everything is variable captured. So you can use register keyword for capture the output of the task, and this is a very helpful when you will write advanced level of playbook or larger project. So in this way you can do the hands-on on Ansible variables. So in this video we have discussed about what is variables, how to define variables in Ansible playbook, and how to use that variables in task. Then what is host variable, what is group variables. Then we also discuss how to define variables under files, under directory. Then we also discussed about how to capture the uh, output of the task using register keyword. So thanks for watching this video. I will share this article links in YouTube video also. And if you have any doubt in this video, you can ask your doubt in comment section. Please like this video if it is helpful for you, and please also subscribe this channel so that if I upload any video, you will get direct notification. So thanks again watching this video.